Hey, everybody. As you know, I am William Wallace, and thank you so much for tuning in to my show, William Wallace for America. As you know, I like to tell everybody, of course, the proper way to spell my name. Everybody gets it confused. But the reason for that is because you'll be able to find this show not only here on Facebook Live, but I'll keep it recorded. We're going to have it on Rumble. We'll have it on, have it podcasted. It'll be on YouTube. But most importantly, I want you to know that when I went to CPAC, I met some really interesting people, some people that are fighting for our country. And a lot of people think of CPAC as just one of those Republican groups, those Republican meetings. But the reality is, I think I met a lot of independents there. I even met some Democrats. It's really more about values, conservative values. And I always have to tell people that conservative values are things that we can find as much on the Democrat side as we can on the Republican side. But even more importantly, things I found at CPAC were people and organizations that just love our country and they love the values of our country and they want to do the right thing for our country. And sometimes it's just different ways. But in this case, with this next organization that I'm bringing on a gentleman by the name of Dwayne McClure. He's the executive director of America First PACT. And you'll find that his organization just shares and helps candidates. And there's a lot of other things that it does. So we'll just stay tuned here as I bring on Dwayne McClure. Dwayne, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Dwayne, look, not only was it great to meet you at CPAC, but it was great to hear about what your organization is doing. And while a lot of people are just seeing the interview and they're not getting to see the camaraderie that we had, I got to tell you, you're a really nice person. And I want people to see that in this interview because I think it's important when they see that you as being as a good person, you bring that same sentiment to the organization that you have, which I think shows more people the good things that you all are doing.
Absolutely, and thank you. Yeah, I always said throughout my entire life that my biggest priority is working with good people, and I feel like if you're going to have a standard of working with good people, you should probably be a good person.
Well, tell people about what you did because I think it's important when you talk about working with good people. What did you do before America First PACT?
Yeah, so actually, despite the looks of it, I've been at this for almost 20 years, uh, since before I could even drive. But I actually ran a political consulting firm that I started out of my dorm room in
Mhm.
college, and then I turned around and sold it last year, and found myself back in it after swearing it off.
Wait, so you mean you were out? You sold your consulting firm and you were out. So you were done, but somehow I'm doing the hand motion of what, it drug you back into it. It sucked you back in some way or another.
Well, I found out, I didn't know this at the time, but I found out that you can never really leave. So I looked at my now wife, and
Yeah,
I was like, okay, I'm out. I was like, I've given it,
I'm
I've
done.
given it
Yeah.
my all. I've done all the blood, sweat, and tears and 20-hour days and sleeping on office floors and
Yeah.
showering at local Y's because I couldn't go to the hotel because I didn't have enough time.
Yeah.
I had a whole bunch of Y memberships around the country, by the way.
Really?
Yeah,
Are
because
you-
you got to shower somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So you're out on the campaign. Look, I've been
That's
there,
why I'm
done
out.
that. You're on the campaign trail and you just went someplace to lay your head, get a shower, lay your head, and get up early for the next day of knocking on doors.
Yep. And a lot of people don't realize uh, that kind of lifestyle, it takes a toll. Because I had an apartment, and I counted one year. I was in that apartment for a total of 6 weeks out of the whole year because I was always somewhere else.
Will you travel all over the country?
Uh, at my peak, I traveled to 15 different states regularly and had 38 clients in 15 states and Canada.
So not only you were in it, you were in it deep.
Oh, yeah.
So you were consulting, you got your name out there, and then of course because you were doing it on a big level, you get bought out, and now you get sucked back in.
I got sucked right back in, and it's funny. I got sucked right back in because two guys, one of which was an old client of mine, and another which was somebody that one of my colleagues was like, "Okay, if you're gonna come out of retirement, you've got to come out for this guy.
Yeah.
Just one last ride."
One last time. Just
It
yeah,
like
exactly.
it felt like I don't know how many of your viewers have seen Fast and Furious, but every Fast and Furious pretty much ends the same way with Vin Diesel looking at the crew and saying, "One last ride."
One
And
last ride.
and
Yeah.
that's what
Right.
it felt like, is that he's like, "If you've got one last ride, I've got a guy for you." And they had similar ideas about this, uh, pact, about an organization of candidates, uh, helping each other get across the finish line, and they're like, "Well, we don't know how to do it." So, Dwayne, how do you feel about it?
You know how to do it, don't you? You can figure it out.
Yep.
So this was one of your previous clients, you said, came to you and said, "I have an idea of an
Mhm.
organization that's gonna help get other clients across the line." So what was their shtick? What was their main reason for starting this? The name, of course, is America First PACT, but is there an agenda behind it, or was it simply just to help candidates? Because it sounds to me like it's almost parallel to another consulting firm,
Yeah.
but I know it's not, and I'm only saying that because I'm of course I told you I ask questions at a very basic level, but so why what is it about America First PACT? Why was it started? What's the agenda? How is it different from a consulting firm, so to speak?
Yeah. So the America First PACT, the biggest difference I'd say between a consulting firm and what we do is we are an organization that's made up of candidates. I'm the only person in the organization who's not a candidate, uh, but we exist. Starting off, it was, hey, we have Corey Gibson in Washington's fourth district, and we have Brandon Wilkinson in Missouri's third. They have overlapping skill sets. So Corey is a wizard with marketing, and he owns a marketing company. Brandon is really good at social media, so they help strengthen each other. It's pretty much the biblical principle of iron sharpens iron,
Okay.
put into effect. And what we're really trying to go for is putting that into effect, not only for the candidates but for the American people, because as we started talking about this more, we realized more and more that this is exactly what this country needs right now, which is a bunch of everyday people getting together,
Right.
helping each other how they can, and putting forward an America First agenda. And that's actually something we're really doing right now with a lot of our candidates. Is they've broken out into committees, and they're crafting a comprehensive America First policy and platform, not just for their elections, but for the next 20, 30, 50 years. Like, we're really very forward thinking. Uh, and that kind of just led to the evolution of what it is now. Because I was talking with one of our candidates earlier today, and they were talking about all the candidate things that they have to do. And I was like, yes. I was like, but you don't realize we're about to get into grassroots and media and training.
Right.
We are essentially creating an auxiliary to the party. And it's funny because one of the objectives that I set when I sat down with Dr. Kelly Ward, who's the chairwoman of our
All right.
organization, when I sat down with her, is
And
I
she was
said,
a
"I want."
previous customer, you said, right?
No, 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 she was not.
Okay.
She was actually brought in because we were blessed with some very,
Okay.
very good relationships.
I
Uh,
thought you go where you were going before that though.
oh yeah, but we sat down and I told her, I was like, the goal is simple for me, and she was like, okay, what's the goal? And I said, the goal is to fundamentally change the Republican Party. We want to fundamentally change the DNA of the Republican Party. As
Hmm.
long as I've been a Republican, which is as long as I can remember, the Republican Party has been a party. Um, there's no nice way to say it, of losers like Mitch McConnell. People
It's
who.
interesting. I said something about this earlier. I said, the Democrats play to win, the
Mhm.
Republicans play to not lose.
Yep. And if and
And
I was.
and as a result, the ones who win, you know, when they're in office, they still play to not lose.
Yep.
They're lucky enough to win, but they're just playing not to lose. And the Democrats run circles around them because they play to win.
Yep, exactly. And I think I touched on this when I was talking with you at CPAC,
Right.
but I grew up in a family where I'm the exception, not the rule, as
Okay.
a conservative. So much so that my grandparents are actually really good friends with Saul Alinsky, like I told you.
Your grandparents were good friends with Saul Alinsky?
Yes.
Oh,
I
wow.
did not find that out until I got politically active. And I started bad mouthing Saul Alinsky. And my grandfather was like, "You don't know who you're talking about. He was one of our good friends." And I was like, "Oh, goodness." Because
Really?
my mom's people are from California. So he died in Carmel, California. And he was one of my grandparents' good friends. But I say that to say that, you know, there's one thing that he was really, really good at, and that's he knew that it didn't matter if you didn't play by the rules as long as your opponent played by the rules.
Okay. So
And
if your opponent's playing by the rules, you
mhm,
play by your own rules, and that means that you can circumvent his rules and learn how to win the game because you write your own rules.
you'll win every time. And the
I love
problem
it.
is that the Republican Party, it always tries to move the goalpost to the new rules. So a part of what the pact is about is finding people who are willing to stand firm and say, no, 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 no. This is what it means to be a conservative. This is what it means to be America first. And if you don't like that, we don't care if you call us Nazis. I mean, I've been called a Nazi because I've helped start this organization. I'm a six
Probably
foot
by your own grandparents, right?
Yeah, I was like, I'm a 6'3" biracial guy in the South, and I've been called Nazi by like the I hope your audience won't be offended by this, but like the whitest dude in the world in New
Yeah.
Hampshire. And he's like, "You're a Nazi." And I'm like, "Have you seen me? I
Yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah, you see what I look like? I'm biracial, right?
I was like, I don't make the cut for Hitler. I'm sorry to disappoint you."
Like Hitler would have had me in 3 different lines in the gas chamber, right?
Yeah, like he would have had me.
So
Yeah.
was America First PACT, and I'm going backwards for just a second. We're going to talk like this for a while, and I love the fact that people are going to get a chance to know you like I've known you, like I got to know you because I think that your personality and your background says it all about America First as being the representative or the executive director, as you will, for America First PACT. I think it says a lot about the PACT and where you're going and the good things that can be seen from it. So was the original goal for America First PACT, was it to build a coalition of candidates, or is it, as the name says, is it to put America first? What was the original reasoning for America First PACT?
So the answer to your question is actually both. It was to get a bunch of candidates who wanted to put America first in a coalition together to help each other across the finish line. We didn't want to, and we still don't, just take anyone who wants to be a member. We have to vet them. We go deep. We look into their social media. We look into their race, their past. We want to make sure that we're talking to people who are committed to America's liberty, to our Constitution and traditions. In
Right.
fact, I don't think I went over it, but PACT actually stands for Protecting America's Constitution and Traditions.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's what PACT stands for.
I thought it was like pack, like you're another pack.
Nope, it's Protecting America's Constitution and Traditions.
I love this. You'll like it because the interview that I did right before you, the one I had on for the last hour before you, he is an organization called Save Our States, and we talked about how the Electoral College is under attack and
Mhm.
how it's being undermined, how the foundation of the Electoral College is being undermined by Democrat groups who want to replace our Electoral College with a popular vote instead, which I would like to point out that that probably coincides with what you're talking about, which is protect Americans' constitutional traditions. Is that right?
Constitution and traditions. So we stand
Constitution and tradition.
firmly we
Yeah.
stand firmly, all of our members are originalists, and they read the Constitution with originalist intent.
So the person
So
who founded America First PACT, their idea was to build an organization that protects America's constitutional and traditional values by finding candidates who are going to carry that, or going to carry that water, toe that line, and I mean all that in a most positive way, to be able to win elections that do though that like I said, achieve those goals of protecting our Constitution and traditions. Was it your parallel? I don't want to say agenda in a bad way, but was it your parallel goal to change the Republican Party, or was that part of the original ideas of this organization?
well, I would say that that was probably more so my
Your
parallel
idea,
agenda, to use your phrase, mostly because I saw that as the greatest long-term need that our republic has.
hmm
Uh, our republic needs a robust and strong Republican Party that can actually provide a backbone, because the phrase that I often heard out there on the trail was from independents was, "Why would I be a Republican? They don't even know what they stand for."
right? Exactly.
So we're providing a viable alternative to that. Why should I be a
Right.
Republican? And it's like, because we're going to give you a party that actually stands for something
hmm
unequivocally. Like, these people are not doing it for political expediency, because there's so many other ways that they could be, getting their name out there, that would
Right.
be a heck of a lot easier for them.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because some of the people behind these organizations, like what you're referring to, is they don't need an organization to get their agendas across. They've got either money or power or
Mhm.
positions that they can just go ahead and donate to whoever they want to donate, or talk or convince whoever they want to talk to, or convince that this is how you should be. But by starting a pact or an organization like this, and hiring somebody like yourself that has these same things in your heart and has some good things in your heart, that's what I was referring to earlier,
Mhm.
to be able to magnify their voice in a way that we bring this nationwide and really make an impact. Is
Yeah,
that kind of what you're talking about?
absolutely. And this is 100% a passion project for me. I do not make a dime doing this. It's just because I believe in the mission.
Wait, 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 wait. You're putting America first for
Oh,
free?
oh yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, you got to be able to walk the walk, right?
Okay.
And if something comes of this down the road, sure, whatever. But right now, my focus is putting our country in the best position possible to succeed. Because look at the nation that we've been blessed with, and how much it's
Mm.
been squandered in a year and a half.
Right.
Like, we've got to put something in place that can make sure that something like this never happens again.
Right.
'Cause the next time, there is no America to save.
Right. And unfortunately, right now, I tell people, it's there's so many people, and I have a lot of friends who are, they're like, oh, America's fine. You sound like one of those conspiracy theories. Our elections aren't stolen. We're not in debt. Everything's okay. Go back to work. Go back to sleep. Everything's fine. But the reality is, everybody jokes about, you know elections being stolen or the dead voting, but
Mhm.
nobody wants to admit that we have problems with our election system. Everybody wants to talk about, how the government needs to pay its bills, but nobody wants to talk about how they're printing money to do it. And I repeated this over and over and over again until I'm blue in the face. But you know what? People just aren't listening, or they're calling people. I've got people that call me conspiracy theorists because they're like, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. I'm like, you mean $30 trillion is conspiracy theory? I mean, like our freedoms and liberties are under attack. And there's some people say, "Oh, you're crazy for thinking that." And I go, "Wait a minute. We've added more debt to our country in the last 10 years than we have in the previous 240 years.
Yep.
If that's not an attack on personal liberty and freedoms, I don't know what is, because debt is a theft of liberty and freedom. And
Mhm.
in 5, 10, 20, 30 years, this debt is be so insurmountable. They're looking at us. That government isn't going to say, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to pay off that debt." No, they're going to say, "We're going to pay off that debt with your money."
Yeah.
And when they do, we're going to be working harder, more hours, paying more taxes. And when we're paying more taxes to pay off the debt, we're not going to be able to do all the things, fun things that we do, or go the places that we want to go, or buy the things that we want to buy. And if that is not a loss of freedoms, I don't know what is.
Right. And ultimately, to touch back on something that you just said really briefly about government, oh, we'll pay it, we'll pay for it.
Right.
That is no good because government is essentially your broke best friend that you don't want. They have no money except
I love that one. Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Another dollar? Can I just have another dollar? Come
they're
on.
like, they're like, let me hold a dollar.
Yeah. Can I hold a dollar?
Good for it. I'll just
Yeah.
ask you for the dollar to give you the dollar back.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm gonna ask another friend for another dollar. Right. I got it.
So, to touch on that, but yeah, absolutely. And we've seen throughout the course of history that the more indebted a government becomes, the more tyrannical it becomes because it has to find new ways to make up the law,
Exactly.
and it often impinges on freedoms and liberties to do so.
Right. No, that's 100% accurate. So America First PACT is trying to find candidates who think the same way you and I think. Would you?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
you know,
We are looking for this. This might get us some bad news out of the talking heads at CNN or whatever. But we're looking for the conspiracy theorists because the
right.
only difference between a conspiracy theorist and the reality of this present situation is 6 months.
6 months. Why 6 months?
Well, look at it. Last year, we were all conspiracy theorists when we were like, these vaccines aren't working. We were all conspiracy theorists when we were like, maybe these masks don't make sense.
Right.
And fast forward 6 months, and what do they tell us? The efficacy rates are low, the masks don't work.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to
6
your
months.
point, what's interesting is like I'm not anti-vaccine, I'm not anti-mask.
I'm
I'm
pro-freedom.
pro-choice. Yeah, yeah, I'm like give the people a choice. But what I've found when we talk about this is I meet a lot of people, and I'm gonna tell you, I met a very prominent elected. Well, they're not. She's not elected. She's appointed in Louisiana, and
Mhm.
she gave a public speech 2 nights ago. I was there, and she talked about how her son got the second vaccine and got was it myocarditis
Yeah.
at and he's just a teenager and he got that from the vaccine. So my point of saying that and the bounce off of you, and I'm glad you kind of gave me the layup there, is that while we don't have to be get pro or against vaccines, if we just put out the information out there, it doesn't mean that we're conspiracy thinkers. It means that we're it's my way of promoting freedom. It's my way of saying, look, here's the information. I'm against mandates. Now, here's the information. You go make your own decision. But because I put America first and I put freedom and liberty first, and I put those things first. And by you all doing that, we promote candidates who put the power back in the people's hands and take it away from government's hands. Is that
Absolutely.
where we're going with this?
Yes, and I think that that's why it's been very important that all of our members are normal people. Uh, One of our members out in Colorado, Jules Gray, she has a small business as a photographer. Um, Another guy is a truck driver. Like we just have everyday Americans who are sick and tired of the political establishment, the political elites on both sides just sleepwalk.
Thank you. Yeah. And to your point, I'm gonna bounce off of that. That I look, even though I'm on the right side of the fence, I'm more Republican than I am Democrat. I always tell people, and I repeat this over and over on my show, that I've got friends who are Democrats that are more Republican or more conservative than my Republican friends say that say,
Yep.
oh, I'm Republican, I'm a conservative, and I'm like, no, you Republican, you act more like a Democrat. I got a Democrat friend who acts more Republican. I think conservative values, American values, putting America first values are things that know no political party.
Yeah.
And I think if we all find ways to promote American values and conservative type of values, I think we bring more people together to save this country. And again, to your point, that there's Republicans who are just as guilty as Democrats get blamed for,
Yep.
on issues. And that's why, and I want to talk more about this with your organization, that I think when you really talk about the candidates who believe in America, freedom, liberty, constitutional and traditional values, it puts America first instead of party first.
Right. Absolutely. And America should come first. Actually, while we're talking about it, a lot of the influence for the America First philosophy, if you really go back to it, goes to George Washington's farewell address. One of the big items that he had for the American people was to not accrue major debts, to not get into too many entangling foreign alliances, and to not let the mischief of factions or parties divide you so much so that you lose sight of country. And it's kind of sad that pretty much after he left, we went and did all three.
All the things he said he warned us against.
Mm-hmm. And I personally think that George Washington, uh, there could not have been a better man for the role, because he was so diligent and he was so prescient in what he saw as important for the future of this country. And I think we need a lot more people in public service like that, who are looking at it as the decisions I make today don't affect my election cycle, they affect the next 200 years.
That's a great way to put that. I really like how you said that. I mean, Dwayne, that's perfect. I wish more elected officials thought like that and said, "Hey, how's my election victory going to affect the next 200 years? How can I take my victory in a campaign and secure our country for the next 200 years? How can I keep us on track with my victory?" And not enough people are thinking that. But when people talk about our founding fathers, I always do this because there are people who don't like our founding fathers. They have all the bad things to say, and I
Of course.
tell them this. I said, God uses imperfect people oftentimes to do the perfect job.
Mm-hmm.
And as much criticism as the founding fathers can get for things during their time frame, I always say, you know, our founding fathers, may have been imperfect, but the things that they did were perfect. I mean, the things that they did gave not only us here in America freedom and liberty, but they've given people all over the world freedom
Yeah.
and liberty. And our Constitution doesn't seek to control freedom and liberty, it seeks to disperse freedom and liberty. And that's why when our Constitution has been used to protect freedom and liberty around the world, and it's not because it seeks to control, it's because our Constitution seeks to distribute freedom and liberty around the world.
Right. And the United States Constitution is arguably the most perfect document written by man, inspired by man. Uh, I say that because the Bible is the most perfect document written by man, inspired by God.
I love it.
That said, our Constitution is a masterpiece because it proclaims a very simple truth, and it's that government exists for one purpose: and that is to protect freedoms and liberties that you already have.
Absolutely.
They're not giving it to you. The government doesn't give you these rights. The government is acknowledging that they're there for them to protect.
Did you listen to my podcast?
I've listened to a few episodes.
So I'm gonna invite you and and put this on your queue. If you listen to my podcast, it's on any app, any podcast app. The title is "Protecting Freedom, Liberty in America." I
Mhm.
talk exactly about this in that podcast, and I say, our not only can we say that our rights are endowed by our Creator, because it's in our Constitution. But when you look at the Bible, I don't think it's ironic at all that throughout the whole Bible it talks about freedom. And
Yeah.
when you look at the Bible, throughout the whole Bible, it talks about freedom. Well, our Constitution talks about protecting freedom and liberty. And
Yep.
while it's inspired by God, I believe that our Constitution protects our freedom and liberty here in our country. And we need to think about that. You don't have to be religious or overwhelmingly, a Bible thumping, religious person to go, hey, I want my freedoms and liberties. God gave us our freedom and liberty. Our Constitution protects it. And that's what we need to really focus on, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, and I even think for people who are not religious that that makes the happenstance of America even more miraculous. That all of this happened without some kind of divine intervention, that all of the right people met at the right time to make the right decisions, to win the right war, to fight the right fights
That's
for
amazing.
this to happen. And it happened for the a-religious, it happened without God.
Yeah.
Like, that's even more impressive.
Yeah, that's it. You know what, Dwayne? I didn't even think about that. I'm glad you said that. It's a great thought. People think of when they think of the Bible that they have to be religious to be able to believe in the freedoms and liberties and the gifts that you get from the Bible. But our Constitution is a non-religious document,
Mhm.
essentially a non-religious document that protects freedoms and liberties for people no matter what your religion is, or whether you're an atheist or a Christian. That Constitution protects your freedoms and liberties, and the Bill of Rights kind of magnifies that the strength of the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't see how anybody can be against protecting it,
Not at
especially
all.
when you see it under assault, because my friends, it is very much under assault in this country. We
Absolutely.
literally there was an interview on The View a few days ago of a constitutional scholar
Yeah. Right.
who said the Constitution's trash. It was trash because it was written by white men who owned slaves. He's like, it wasn't written for me. It wasn't written for women. And it's like, well, it was written for
Right.
humanity.
Well, what's interesting, and I have a friend of mine, K. Carl Smith, who's been on my show before, and he's going to come on again and talk about the whole 3/5 clause and everything. And I've actually read some of the a lot of the founding documents, and I've read some different things that said that many of the founding fathers not only didn't believe in slavery, but they were but because they were in it at that time, they were trying to find ways out of slavery without upsetting the apple cart, so to speak.
Yeah,
And it's a bad way to put it, but but I say it that way to kind of make the example of that they weren't really invested in the idea of slavery, but because it was surrounding them, they were trying to find a way out of it, so to speak. I
yeah.
don't know if you found that same way to be
Well,
true.
there's realism and there's idealism. I
Right.
meet people all the time who are like, "Well, if the founding fathers were so anti-slavery, why didn't they free the slaves?" And it's like, well, unfortunately, the reality of the world was against them. The
Right.
reality of the world was that there were many states, like my native South Carolina, that frankly, wrong as it was, needed slavery for its
Right.
economy. And to essentially end slavery overnight would have caused your country, this grand American experiment that was
Right.
already fledgling, to collapse. There
Exactly.
would be no America for them to complain about.
Right. Well,
It
you know, in one of the Alexander Hamilton papers, you know, they talk about how, you know, to if they would have eliminated slavery at the time, that many slaves would have been in a worse predicament than they
Mhm.
were in slavery. And not that makes it right. I'm not saying it makes it right, but
No.
I'm just saying that at that time, you know, I think they were working with the constraints that they had. But what also at that time, there's other documents that I've found that I'm actually going to do a podcast on that not many people realize. But the founding fathers actually in the Constitution before the Constitution had created a document that was going to ban slavery in all new states. So that way, you know, bouncing off of that, they're basically saying, okay, because we know we can't, you know, like a better word, upset the apple cart in these states that already are surviving off of this economy. In the new states have to be set up without this type of economy, and they saw that as a pathway to be able to eliminate slavery in the other states as the years would go on, to watch and emulate these new economies in these new states. I don't know if
Right.
you heard that or not.
I could see that argument, and
I don't know if you had heard that or not about that document. I'm
no.
gonna get the name of the document.
Yeah. I've not heard of the document, but it wouldn't surprise me that it exists. Uh, but what I'm thinking as we're talking about this is once again those people who'd be like, "Well, that's not good enough because it didn't end slavery." Uh, it's very easy to look at things through the prism of being in an air-conditioned house in 2022.
Right,
A heck of a lot easier to cast aspersions and judgment on a world that you do not live in, that you do not understand,
right.
uh, and you never will, frankly. But to consider the monumental task that these men had before them and what they were able to achieve with it, and the things that they put into motion. For example, the ban that was in our Constitution on the transatlantic slave trade. Like that never gets mentioned.
Yeah, that never gets mentioned. So you're so what I'm bouncing off of you again here. So a lot of people don't realize that the foundation that they laid, you know, not only for the Constitution, has given America and people freedoms ever since then, and our freedoms have expanded. You know, whether it's people, cultures, races, religions, our freedoms have expanded over the years since the founding fathers first laid that foundation. But
Yeah.
I want to get us back to America First PACT. You know, so because we've talked a lot about this, and it's not just the sentiment that's in our hearts, but do you feel that these same sentiments are what makes America First PACT something that that more people need to get to know and get involved in to be able to help other not only candidates but help preserve our constitutional and traditional values in our country?
Absolutely. I think that these are principles that pretty much all rational Americans can agree upon.
Right,
That our liberties don't come from government. Our rights are under attack by that same government, and that we have to rein it in because no one else is going to come save us.
right.
We have to do it ourselves, and we
No,
have
you're
to do
exactly
it.
right.
Yeah, it's like we have to do it by making some things that might be perceived as uncomfortable situations. We have a candidate, for example, who's running for Congress against someone that's a family friend because that person uh, is, for lack of a better term, a rhino. And
Okay.
he said, I love this man. He's a family friend. He comes over for dinner on Sundays, but he's not what's best for this country. He's not putting it first.
So let's talk about about that. What kind of candidates do you guys have? How many candidates do you have right now? And you know, can you give if you can give any names or just kind of tell a little bit about those people and some of their values that you guys. So these are candidates that you all are supporting. So how many candidates do you all have, and what kind of candidates are y'all supporting right now?
Yeah, I was like, so right now we have about 25 candidates or so, and by the end of next week, because we're still going through our CPAC list,
Right.
in the next week, we'll probably have about another 10 to 15. So about 40 by the end of next week. But
I
we
did
have,
meet Brandon Wilkinson, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah,
Brandon Wilkinson's one of them. Brandon
yeah.
Wilkinson is the truck.
His little coat that says "Let's go, Brandon,"
Mhm.
and,
Yeah,
and he can get away with it because his name is Brandon.
yeah, it was beautiful. It was
Yeah,
just handed to him on a silver platter.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, there's Brandon Wilkinson. He's a truck driver, just a hardworking American
Mhm,
guy who is fed up with his career establishment politician in Missouri's third district,
mhm.
who hasn't. One of the congressmen that he reached out to for support said, "Well, we're not going to go against him because he hasn't committed any of the major sins." And my thing
Major,
was major sins besides voting against veterans consistently
right?
and being in Congress for 8 terms.
Right,
Like to me, those are pretty big sins. But
exactly.
that's Brandon Wilkinson, and then you have Corey Gibson in Washington's fourth. He's running against Dan Newhouse, who is one of the Republicans that voted to impeach Trump. So he's running against him up there in Washington's fourth, but he's actually the guy who came up with the idea for the pact. Is Corey Gibson.
Okay.
Then there's Jules Gray in Colorado.
So, like, Corey Gibson came up with the idea for America First PACT.
Hmm.
Okay,
He came up with it, and Brandon had a similar concept, and both of them were like, okay, I just wish I knew somebody who was running, and then we could get this thing started. And I was like, well, I happen to know both of
I
you.
just happen to know some people.
Yeah, I happen to know some people. Let's get this.
So basically, some people went to the founder of America First PAC. Can you give us that name?
That was Corey Gibson.
So Corey Gibson is the person who started America First PACT.
Yeah, he was a candidate who turned to me and said, "Can you help me start this?"
Awesome. Okay, so he came to you, and obviously, like you said, he was your candidate. You got him into Congress, right?
No, 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 he's running.
Yeah, he's run for Congress now. So he
Yeah,
came to you and said, "Hey, can you start this pact? I want to find a way to help other candidates put America first, and we can band together on, like-minded people can
yep.
band together to put America first and put you in charge of it."
To put America first, and I look at my role as I'm just a facilitator. What I do is I just do what it takes to make things work.
Mhm.
So if that means that I'm out there making phone calls to to people who have different media lists or data lists or something like that that we could use for our candidates, that's what I do. If it's negotiating prices with vendors, that's what I do. I just do what it takes. Like, for example, I told you this is my first interview ever. That's because I typically am at the back of the room. But they said, Dwayne, we are going to need a media presence. We're going to need more more of you talking.
Right.
Like, well, if so needed, here I am.
And here you are.
Yeah, and here I am.
So now we're talking about how many candidates you have, and you got one in Washington, one in Missouri. I
Mhm.
met Brandon Wilkinson. Anybody else that we might know about?
We have Willie Montague
Okay,
out in Florida in the Orlando area. He's running for Val Deming's old seat because she's running for Senate now.
okay,
We have Terry Namkung, Dr. Terry Namkung, who is an Air Force vet and a good Christian man who's running against Bobby Scott up in Virginia.
mm,
And Bobby Scott, like I said, I look at things through the prism of South Carolina politics because that's where I grew up. But he's basically going up against their Jim Clyburn. So this is an established name
wow,
in that community, but he hasn't done anything for the minority community. And Dr. Namkung is like me; he's biracial, but he's black and Asian.
okay,
So he's black and Asian, and he's ready to go out there and fight for his community
right, exactly.
neglected.
I love how we've talked about how, conservative values, no party, no color,
Mm,
and now we're talking how color knows no particular party, but
no,
but freedom and liberty, prevail, over all of those things. And freedom and liberty knows no party, no color, no race, no religion. Just raw freedom and liberty and American values are what seems to be the common or the thread that connects all of these things together to get good candidates elected to save America for everybody's freedom and liberty.
yeah. And that's something that we've really seen, and I've seen throughout my life, is some of the most conservative people that I've ever met are African American. They're Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
They love our country. They love our country. The problem is that the Republican Party has a messaging problem.
Yeah, does.
They do not know how to get the conservative constitutional message out there. They do not understand that this is an intentional process that has been done to minority communities ever
Yeah,
since the
you're
60s.
right.
I like to tell people, because a lot of people don't realize this, but in 1967, do you know which group of people were the most socially upwardly mobile in the United States after white Americans?
The black community.
It was the black community.
Yep. Oh, look, I'm a steal little thunder. I'm sorry, but only because I'm tooting my horn a little bit. And this is one of the things that I learned from K. Carl Smith. He has an organization called Frederick Douglass Republicans,
Hmm.
and I gotta tell you, I've learned from him, how before the Civil Rights Act, before the New Deal, and before the LBJ and all the welfare reforms, that Black America were had scored, their children scored equally on testing as white people did. Black Americans' entrepreneurship rate was actually higher than white people's entrepreneurship rate.
Yep.
The black people had a lower divorce rate than white people. And when you look at all these things, these are conservative values.
Hmm.
So to your point, conservative values know no color,
Yeah.
and they're really not. The problem with the Republican Party, again, and I'm only bouncing off of what you gave me the good thing, the good thoughts for it. I want to thank you for that. That the Republican Party's messaging problem is so bad and so poor, they keep using the word conservative. Well, they've done it so much to a point that the Democrats and the media uses it against us. If you say you're conservative, you might as well say you're a racist, and
Oh,
and, and because they're not good enough with the narrative to show that conservative values aren't far right wing Republican values. They're just basic human values.
yeah.
They're just values that not only bring people together, but they give people good lives. And people don't talk about that. The messaging, it's
Yeah.
all about the messaging.
Well, and to go back to your point, off of
Yeah.
conservative values and
We're having a good tete-a-tete here.
yeah,
Yeah.
and minorities, uh, it's just it's very simple. Is that you can look. I grew up in, like I said, biracial, but I grew up going to my family church that my dad's parents and grandparents had gone to.
Saul
And
Alinsky fans.
hmm?
The Saul Alinsky fans.
No, no, no. These were my dad's people in
Oh,
South Carolina.
it was your mom's people that were the Saul
My
Alinsky.
mom's
Okay,
people
okay,
were
okay, okay.
were the Saul Alinsky
All
folks,
right.
but these are my grandparents on my dad's side. Black church, historically black church, some of the most conservative people you'll ever meet. But the thing is that the Republican Party had lost the messaging war. And another part of where the Republican Party fails is that the Republican Party, like I said earlier, we're a party of losers,
Right.
and we pick up our ball and we go home. We've forsaken the black vote. We've just kind of
Right.
thrown in the towel.
Yeah, exactly.
We did the same thing with the Latino vote, and I think that a lot of Republicans have been lulled into this sleep of, well, now we're picking them up because of the returns in the Rio Grande Valley and in South Florida
Right.
and the Atlanta suburbs of the African American community. I was like, that wasn't the Republican Party.
Yeah.
That was Donald Trump. The
Right.
Republican Party still has a problem.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
but here's the thing is that as much of a problem the Republican Party has, the Democrats have a greater problem because their policies are the ones that are hurting minority communities.
Right.
Their policies are the ones that are breaking up minority families. Their policies are the ones that are locking children into schools that will produce nothing for them long term.
Exactly right.
And I never understood for the life of me why a single Republican doesn't get up there and says, whenever they're called a Nazi, I'm a Nazi because I want their children to go to a better school, but you want to keep them in poverty. I'm the Nazi.
Right. And see
I don't think because I don't think that they need a strong white leader to come in and save them from the suburbs. Like,
mhm.
yeah, it's always the white knight syndrome, William. I don't
Right.
know if you've noticed it. It's never a guy that comes out looking like me saying, "I'll save the black community."
Right. Right, exactly.
It has to look like Joe,
Yeah, it looks like Joe.
like Sleepy Joe, and they're the same.
You mean Sleepy Joe who called black kids cockroaches?
Cockroaches, and said that they were just as bright and capable as white children,
Right.
but he said poor instead of black because
Yeah, right,
everyone knows that
exactly.
poor is the code word for black.
Right. And you know what's interesting is like you just hit the nail on the head when you said how Republicans are so bad at their messaging, yet their policies are better for poor people, for all people, for people, that are in
Yeah,
disadvantaged situations, whereas the Democrats, are great at their messaging of convincing people that their bad policies
yep,
are better, and the reason they do it that way is because they realize the more they keep them in poverty, the more they keep themselves in power.
yep,
And if the Republicans, and this is what I like about, I'm getting back here to America First PACT. This is what I like about what you all are doing is when we first started this interview, you said your one of your goals, your parallel goals for America First PACT was to change the Republican Party. And
mhm,
if we can truly change the Republican Party, and that means pull the establishment, back to listening to us, and pull the establishment back to being more mainstream Republican than being far right establishment Republican. If we can achieve that goal and make them change their messaging, and we can show more people that we have policies that work, we'll survive forever.
yeah. Well, and the only way to show the
That was, a,
American
that was just a quick way for me to get to the point.
yeah, I was like, the only way for the American people to see that conservative policies work is to actually see conservatives work. And simply put, the Republicans that we've sent to Congress, we've sent a few good ones. There's a few fighters up there
Yeah,
that are
exactly.
doing the right thing, and there's a few up there who pretended to be fighters and got their jobs, and now they're fine. But the American people haven't seen a movement of 10, 20, 30 candidates and eventual congressmen and women and state level people. We have attorney general candidates, gubernatorial candidates. Like they haven't seen these people actually stand with a backbone.
Hmm.
So how can you have confidence in a party that doesn't have confidence in itself because it's not playing to win. They don't care about the results as long as they keep getting reelected.
Right.
And they have no they have no confidence, so whenever their opponent charges them with some outlandish claim of racism, they go on the defensive and curl up in a ball. "I'm not a racist, I'm
I'm not
not."
a racist. Yeah.
I'm gonna share this story with you real quick. I think I told you this at CPAC, but I was actually protested once. Uh, it's funny because the people who protested clearly didn't do any research. I'm walking in with a buddy of mine for a brief speaking engagement to a young Republicans group. And the college socialists of this institution just so happened to be outside. And I'm walking in with my buddy who's 6'1", 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyed. nicest dude in the world. Apparently he's a Nazi though. So
Oh,
that's
really?
yes. According to the protesters that were out there, they were chanting Nazi, fascist, uh, get that guy off of our campus. We don't accept hate. Dwayne McClure has got to go, and they're talking about him. It's funny.
I didn't realize that you were Dwayne McClure.
I go up to this one guy, and one thing that I'm known for in my realm is, like I said, I like being a fly on the wall. I like being in the back of the room, and I carried that with me into my political career because I often just did kind of like an undercover boss kind of thing where I'd go
Right.
do my campaigns and just like talk to people and be like, hey, to the senior staff, I'd be like, don't acknowledge me as the consultant, as anything. Like, I'm just a volunteer. I want to know
Right.
what people think, feel about this race. And I kind of did the same thing to this guy, is I just walked up to him and he had the nasty dreads, like the nasty dreads that no one should ever have.
Mm.
Reeked of weed. Reeked of weed.
Dreads that smell like weed. Imagine that.
Shocking, I know. But I started talking to him and I was like, yeah, it's like, so what are you out here for? And he's like, I'm here to protest the fascist that's coming to speak at our campus. And I was like, okay. I was like, what's he talking about? And he's like, he's talking about how the Republican Party best frees individual liberty and minorities. But we all know that and he used some choice words. And
Yeah, right.
I was like, okay. And I was like, so what's this guy like? And he's like, he's just another one of those fascist Nazis, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, well, I've got about 5 minutes before I have to go in. And he's like, you're going to that? And I was like, yeah, I'm speaking. Dwayne A. McClure, nice to meet you. The look on his face was priceless because it's not what they expect. And the
Right,
thing
exactly.
is that we fail as conservatives because I could have very easily tried to defend myself as I'm not a racist. But the problem is that the moment you start playing by your opponent's rules, this is
Right.
another Saul tactic.
Yeah,
The moment
exactly.
you start playing by your opponent's rules, you've already lost. You can't win a game where they dictate the terms. So if someone ever calls me a Nazi now, I'm just like, blackest one you've ever seen.
I love that. A friend of mine who's actually used to be very political, who's very non-political now, he gave me some advice that I follow to this day. He says, you will never change your opinions. He
Nope.
says, and the more, and he says, the more you try to change your opinions, the more you galvanize their opinion. And so, like you just did, I don't try to change people's opinions anymore. I'm like, you want to think that? Go right ahead. Whatever you want to think is what you're going to believe. And eventually, if they want to change that's another thing about messaging. Republicans think that, like some of the diehard, like average day, everyday Republicans who are on the campaigns think that they have to change the opinions, that we have to push all the facts in their faces. And if we keep pushing the memes on Facebook and we keep telling the other side of the facts, they're going to eventually one day believe us, and they're not. And you really just got to, like, one day they're going to see it, and many will, but some won't. But instead of wasting your time convincing them otherwise, you spend your time doing positive things like what you were doing. You said,
Yep.
you know what? I'm going about my day. I'm going to go speak. And the ones who ones who are going to change are willing to listen when you do speak.
Well,
So
it's like I had an old football coach and a high school history teacher who used
yeah,
to tell us that the only difference between ignorance and intelligence is time.
that's a really good point. So is this kind of the same now? So America First PACT, is this? I'm kind of circling back here, even though I hate using that circling back thing now because that's that's become a bad thing for Republicans to say because Jen Psaki says it all the time. But is network? Let's circle back. Is this the same again? That same sentiment that America First PACT uses, but most importantly, are you using kind of your background as a campaign consultant and bringing people together on their strong points to help other candidates help each other to win. Is that some of the kind of the same thing that America First PACT is doing to help candidates?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing with our candidates is we're helping strengthen where they're weak and strengthening where they're strong, and then having each other help each other get to where they need to be so they can be an effective, cohesive unit, kind of like an anti-squad. And that's what we're doing on the candidate level. But also, what our organization is doing is, like I said, we want to change the DNA of the Republican Party. So that doesn't just stop at candidates. We actually are going to be branching into training the next generation of conservative leaders, and that's conservative office staff, that's conservative campaign staff, that's conservative thinkers. Like, we came in with a mission that was just candidate focused, but now the goal has become so much larger. The goal has become, let's change the direction of this country by investing not only in this crop of candidates who will live, they will die, they will be mortal men, but in generations and generations to come.
Do we show people that conservatism or conservatives are not a party, but again, an ideological belief that crosses all parties? And
Yep.
and again, conservatism, we can, I don't want to say cherry pick in a bad way, but what I like to tell people, because a lot, I've got some friends who are just everyday people in the way that they're not super religious, they're not unreligious, but they go, but religion scares them away. So they go, oh gosh, I don't want to be one of those conservative Christians that, that's always praying, in public everywhere. And I tell people, well, no, conservative values, do not, you don't have to have all of the values to believe in conservatism. Again, fiscal, you don't have to be so fiscally conservative that you don't believe in the ability of government to help other people, because that form of conservatism chases people away too. They go, well, I want there to be a system that helps people who need help. And so they
Yeah.
don't want to get, but the true conservatives don't want to see government, Medicare or Medicaid. They want to see, people be able to do it themselves. I tell people that believe in the system, I say, no, you can, push all the other conservative, values. And if that's something you still believe in the government helping, that's okay too. Do you see where I'm going with that? The video's pausing for a second, so I know you're gonna catch up here in a second. So, um, I guess basically what I'm saying until the video catches up here is that, conservatism doesn't mean that you have to be, 100% on every single thing that has to do with conservatism. The beauty of conservatism is that it's also freedom and liberty related, and being freedom and liberty related, you have the freedom and liberty to pick and choose the conservative values that you want to live by.
Yeah.
So, the video caught up with you. Did you hear? What do you have to say about everything that I just now said?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. You do have the freedom and liberty to do and choose what you want to believe. Like, there is no dogma that you must follow to be a conservative. I mean, I have my understanding of conservatism, which I would be best described as a paleo conservative or Goldwaterist. But there's some people who conservatism to them includes supporting unions because they think that unions help provide for strong families.
Right?
Um, I'm not necessarily inclined to agree, but that's their
Mhm.
prerogative. At the end of the day,
Right,
that's thing we can
exactly.
rally around, which is we often make better decisions than the government because, like I said, the government is not only our broke best friend that likes to spend all of our money and we don't want hanging around us, but they're also drunk half the time because they're spending
Right.
it on stupid stuff, including people who hate them.
I love that example. You're right, because they're drunk half the time, spending the money, for their own enrichment. But look, I've got friends who are conservative, that are, everything else about them is conservative, but they're pro-choice. and they vote Democrat because they're pro-choice, but everything else about them is conservative. And so, I said the beauty of being conservative is that you don't have to adhere to everything. That it's about freedom and liberty. But these are the things that America First PACT does. You said, right? And
Right.
and then do you also do you bring your experience of campaign consulting to the table with them?
I do. Every member that we have, like I said, I'm doing this with all of my time. Every member that we have, if they have questions, I have answers, or I have people who do have the answers that I've met over the years, and I just really am myself another resource to them.
Yeah.
I didn't realize or think of myself that way until about 3 weeks ago, when somebody said, it's really helpful having somebody who's been doing this their whole life
Yeah.
run this organization. And I was like, huh, I guess it is, because I realized that there are things that the way that I think, the way that I interact with people is
Absolutely right.
entirely different than someone who's been outside of politics. So they
Well,
get,
you're
they get an insight while still being able to be an outsider. They still get the benefits of like someone who thinks constantly like a strategist.
right. How to win.
How
How
to
to
win.
win, and that's what this is about. Well, we gotta start wrapping up here, so just a couple more questions, Dwayne. What is it that any final parting thoughts on America First PACT? Anything you want that you think that we didn't cover that talks about America First PACT? Or how can people get a hold of you all? What's your objective? Things that you're working on? Any final parting words on that? And then I have another question for you after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So some things that we're working on, we're coming up with a lot of candidates, and a lot of causes right now are very big on their contract with America. We're actually in the process of, like I said at the beginning of this show, we're in the process of crafting the first comprehensive America First platform that's been endorsed by multiple candidates and a sitting state GOP chair. So that's something that we're very big on right now. In the next few weeks, we're going to start a national fundraising campaign so we can build out that grassroots development team, so we can build out a media team, so we can actually change the Republican Party from within, not just with candidates, but with everyday Americans who are just fed up
Right,
and want to get involved in the system, because the only way to fix the system is to infiltrate the system. I won't say be a part of it, because
right.
we're on their terms. We're infiltrating. That's what we're doing. We're outsiders. They don't want us. Don't fool yourself. They don't want us.
Right,
Uh,
exactly, exactly. No, and I understand that completely because I hear all the time. I mean, look, you just take the election of Donald Trump, okay? In this last election, you had a group of establishment Republicans that did not want him back in office. So even though they knew about the election integrity problems, they knew about election crimes, they knew about the ballot stuffing and the ballot harvesting, they basically stepped aside because they would rather not have somebody who rallies people together. They would rather find somebody that is going to be more of an establishment minded person, to toe that establishment line instead of a people, liberty, constitution, traditional values first agenda.
Well, I'll probably hurt some people's feelings with this, but I'll say a good benchmark of whether to tell someone in elected office is establishment or not is if they've been doing it for more than 4 terms. At that point, I look at it and I'm like, who are you really serving? Go home.
Right.
And if
Exactly.
not, send them home.
Yep, exactly. I'm all about term limits. Like I love a lot of my elected officials, but I'm still all about term limits because when they start making careers out of it and they're not
Mhm.
doing the jobs for the American people. I mean, look,
Yeah.
just the fact that our national debt has gone up so much in the last 10, 12 years shows me that our elected officials are not working on our best interest. So
Nope.
another question I like to ask everybody: what unites us? I used to ask what unites us, what makes America great. and not to be confused with any candidate, but just what makes our country the greatest country on earth and what unites us. And it ended up being kind of the same question, an overlapping question. I was getting some of the same answers. So I'll ask you, what unites us as Americans? We got your feed is catching up. So I'll talk for a minute while I'm waiting for your feed to catch up. And then when you come back on, when I see you come back on, I'll stop. But when I talk to people about this, I've gotten a lot of different answers on in some different directions. But my purpose of it is because going back to something I said earlier in the show, that I'm looking for things that unite us as Americans. While ideologically, I am more Republican, more conservative minded, which I can't even say that conservative minded because conservatism knows no party. But where I find conservative values are overlapping with my values that make me lean to the right, I always like to tell people that I want to find things that unite us. I want to find things that bring more people to the table, to be able to find ways to, like I say, not only unite us, but find ways that when we come together, we can solve more problems than anything. Looks like we've lost Dwayne completely on the feed. So I'm not sure exactly what's going wrong. So I'm probably going to have to end the show with that. And then I will bring him on later for comments, either on social media or the comment section down below. But I want to thank everybody for listening today and tuning in. And again, you'll find this show on a podcast. You'll find it on my YouTube channel, my Facebook page, and my Rumble page, all at William Wallace for America. And thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much for sharing the podcast. It means a lot to me for people to not only share these videos, but to share the podcast, because that's how we get the word out. But that's how my show grows. And with your support, I can continue to get the same content out there. Thank you so much. And everybody have a great night.